Here's a picture of Neil Park. And then this is a picture I showed last year. They were married for 75 years, which is amazing. And they got married in 1948. Dorothy is now 94, and Neil was 97 when he passed away. There's a dedication that I like and I've used before, and it's from a book by Robert Rhodes Burnham, also a relative. He was a past Grand Master of the Masonry Society in Madison County. And in 1914, he wrote, "Dedicated to the memory of those who have gone before, hoping their spirit of patriotism and service may animate not only those now living, but also those who may come hereafter." It's a very short and simple, but I think a wonderful dedication that I like to use. When you talk about green clay, you have to go back further to Jamestown when his fourth great grandfather, John Clay, came from England. He was actually from Wales, but he came over with the English. So John Smith settled Jamestown in Virginia in 1607. And we were fortunate enough to visit Jamestown last year. That's a statue of John Smith with the memorial church from the 1600s in the background. So John Clay came over with the first ships from England to Jamestown, and he was on the ship called the Treasurer. And as of a couple of months ago, I'm now the treasurer of the California Society of Jamestown. So now I know what killed him. His wife came over about 10 years later, 11 years later, Elizabeth Clay, and she was on the ship called the Anne. And that's what the ships looked like in those days for early Jamestown. These are reproduction ships at Jamestown that show you, these are ships today that shows you what the original ships were like. This is a depiction of Jamestown from the early 1600s, so you can see what it was like to try to protect the people from Indians. And it's called Jamestown because it's right on the James River. And the idea, the directions were to have the settlement at least 50 miles inland from the ocean. So it's that far inland on the James River. This is an aerial view of what Jamestown looks like today. And then this is also where they've done excavations of graves at Jamestown. You can see the John Smith statue in the back right and the memorial chapel and the memorial church in the back center. This is what some of the structures look like and what the wall looked like at Jamestown on the James River. This is the memorial church. And then as far as the Clays in America from 1613, Captain John Clay was known as the English Grenadier. So you look up Grenadier and it's somebody in the front of the troops who's tossing grenades. Well, I don't think they had grenades at that time, but maybe they had some sort of firebomb or something. And he came over with 50 soldiers to defend Jamestown. And he was from Wales, and his wife Anne as well. Their son was Charles Clay, married to Hannah. Their son was Henry Clay. I think you'll recognize that name. And Mary Mitchell. And then their son was Charles Clay again and Martha Green. So Martha Green, don't know if you recognize that, but Martha Green Rhodes, she's my second great grandmother, and she died in 1865 at childbirth. But so that's the name Martha. Green Clay was born in 1757. He died in 1828. He was one of 11 children. He was from Powhatan County, Virginia. He had 9 months of schooling, and then he moved to Kentucky in the fall of 1780 to survey land. In those days, your compensation was keeping up to 50% of the land. And then later on, he settled on what is now Whitehall, but it was the John Tanner Station, built 1781, 1782, and then Green Clay acquired the land and he named it Clermont. It's 6 miles northwest of here. This is a portrait of Green Clay. It's attributed to Asa Park, with the best information I had from Matt Cox is in the back. This is another portrait of green clay. It's by Chester Harding. And this portrait and the one of Sally Lewis, his wife, I've also seen in books where they're both hanging in the parlor to both sides of a fireplace at Woodlawn, which I talked about the last 2 years. Green Clay was a colonel in the Revolutionary War. He was a general in the general of the Kentucky Volunteers in the War of 1812. In 1781, he was the deputy surveyor of Lincoln County, Kentucky. And what he did is he said he'd ride around on a donkey and he was just learning surveying. And he would survey with these other people who were the lead surveyors. And then he'd copy their notes, and then he'd get up really early in the morning and rush to the court and file a claim. So he had his ways of acquiring land, and he also, took advantage of a lot of people in the process. But he acquired a lot of land in that way. In 1787, he was the trustee of Boonesboro, and he's one of the 4 sides of my family that was at Fort Boonesboro with Daniel Boone and Rebecca Boone. 1787 to 89, he was in the House of Delegates for Madison County, and that's when Clermont was built. And 1788, that was a Virginia convention that he was a delegate for. 1793-94, he was in the Kentucky House of Representatives. 1795-96 and 1802-1808, he was in the Kentucky Senate, after Kentucky was the Commonwealth and had separated from Virginia. And in 1807, he was Speaker of the Kentucky Senate. This is Sally Lewis, Sally Ann Lewis Clay, my 4th great grandmother. She was born in 1776, quite a year, and lived until 1867. Her parents were Thomas and Elizabeth Payne Lewis of Fayette County. She was 19 years younger than Green Clay, and she lived 39 years longer. They were married in 1795, had their first of 7 children in 1798. And then after Green Clay died, this kind of startled me a couple of years ago, and I don't know why, but 2 years after Green Clay died, she remarried Jephthah Dudley, who lived from 1878 to 1860. And it just kind of shocked me that she would remarry, but she did. And a lot of people outlived their spouses in those days. This is the Chester Harding painting of Sally Lewis Clay. And this was also hanging at Woodlawn at one point. There were 7 children of Green and Sally Lewis Clay, born between 1798 and 1813. They all lived to adulthood except for Sophia, the last child, who died at 16 months. And she's buried in the Clay Family Cemetery right next to Whitehall. When you look at the front of Whitehall, and if you off to the right, you wouldn't see it from right there, but off to the right, there's a field with a cemetery in the middle, and Green Clay had set aside 1 acre of land for the cemetery. So there's a wooden fence and around several trees, and that's where Green Clay is buried, and other relatives, which I'll show you shortly. The first child was Elizabeth, and she had a nice long life. Sidney Payne Clay and Patrick Shackelford, who is here, descends from Sidney Payne Clay. He only lived to be 34, and information hot off the press, he died from cholera, and he just had 1 child. So it's amazing how when somebody is an only child, how the legacy just grows and grows and grows over the years. My great-grandfather, Hugh the First, he was an only child as well. The next child was Paulina Green Clay. That's my side. And I have my sister Polly, my aunt Polly. There's at least 8 Paulines, and sometimes you'll see Pauline, sometimes Paulina. But Paulina Green Clay Rhodes, that's my 3rd great grandmother, and she had a nice long life. After my great grandfather died of TB in 1886, he was only 36 years old. And the 2 youngest of 5 children also died. My great grandmother packed up the 3 older sons, my grandfather being the youngest, and moved to California. Before they went to California, they went over to Woodlawn to visit Paulina Green Clay Rhodes. And my grandfather still remembered at age 5 meeting his great grandmother. Then there's Sally Ann Clay Irvine Johnson. She also did not live very long, and she's buried in the Green Clay Cemetery. Brutus Clay, who had a long and very busy and illustrious life, and he was very instrumental in all the business of the family. And then Cassius Marcellus Clay, born in 1810, died in 1903. I don't need to tell all of you, he's, maybe the first and most important famous person in Kentucky. I used to think he was the last child. He was the last son, but after him, Sophia was born, and she died at 16 months. This is a oil painting that my cousin has of Pauline Green Clay Rhodes. So when I showed you the other names, Martha comes up, Green comes up, and obviously Clay. Pauline Green Clay Rhodes, she outlived 9 of her 10 children, which I would think would be very difficult. And as I said, my grandfather visited her in 1886 at Woodlawn. This is her husband, Colonel William Billy Rhodes, born in 1794, died 1877, had a long life. This is a portrait that was done of him by Matthew Harris Jewett, who's a Rhodes cousin, so also a relative. And it was done in when he was 26 years old. And it's hanging in my cousin's house. She's actually on the Zoom right now, up in Madera, California. This is just another version of that same picture. It's a little bit easier to see. And as one person told me, it's nice when you have a handsome figure to do an oil painting. And then this is their daughter, Martha Rhodes Breck, and she's the one who died in childbirth at 1865. And again, you see the name Martha, you see the name Rhodes, and her middle name was Green. So Martha Green Rhodes, and then she married Robert Levi Breck. Okay, so the sound kind of came in. Can you all hear me? Okay, thank you. So I have this oil painting hanging in my office, and I have one of my grandfather, and then this is his grandmother, and then I have an oil painting of her grandmother, Eliza Delaney Rhodes. It was painted in 1819. So I have them all in a row, and that's really cool. Okay, this is a quote that I've given before and I like, and it comes from the EKU archives from the memoirs of Catherine Phelps Caperton. And these were memoirs that Kathy Flood donated. So John Estell, who was the grandson of Judge Robert Rhodes, my 4th great grandfather, recounted later on in 1886 to his daughter Sally Ferris, Pa, Wallace Ellis said that Grandpa, Judge Robert Rhodes, sent word to him and Uncle James that he wanted the Estells to stop lawing Green Clay. He wanted his son William to marry Green Clay's daughter Pauline. So there was lots of lawsuits in those days, and lots of times they had to do with land, borders of land, who owned what land, and lots of people suing each other. One of the interesting facts about Kentucky is that there are 120 counties here. It's the 4th most in the United States, but Kentucky's the 37th largest state. So a tremendous number of courthouses for the size of the state. The reason was you needed to be able to ride a horse to a courthouse within a day to record a land deed. So there were lots of land deeds and lots of courthouses, and in the 1700s and 1800s, and attorneys really flourished from that time on. This is a picture that's in the EKU archives. It was done by the 2nd great granddaughter, Sally Clay Lanham, and it's a picture of Clermont, 1798, 1799. So before Whitehall, there was Clermont, and Clermont in French means clear hill. And I believe it was the fact that there was a view from a clear hill and a view of the countryside. So this depiction of Clermont, this is the 2nd version after they added that wing on the left in around 1802. You see that entrance on the right. There was an entrance like that on both sides of the house. But when they built Whitehall around Clermont and included Clermont in Whitehall, the entrance on the other side disappeared, which had been the main entrance. So this is in the EKU archives. This is what Clermont looked like originally. It was basically a box. It was built in 1798, 1799. It was Flemish bond brick, where, you know, for strength, they have Flemish bond, where you have one brick on end and another brick sideways, and walls could be, you know, several bricks wide and up to 2 feet thick. So you can see on the right, there was a drawing room, and on the left, there was a parlor and a dining room. So that's the ground floor, and it's basically a box. And you see the entrances on both sides. The main entrance was the one at the top. Later on, they added this wing a few years later. So off to the left, there's a wing. And after the wing, there was a total of 5 bedrooms upstairs. And there was a kitchen area downstairs on the left. And this is what Clermont looked like until the 1860s, when Mary Jane Warfield Clay expanded the home when Cassius Marcellus Clay was a minister to Russia, and she did a lot of this while he was away in Russia. So this is what it looks like after the addition, post 1800, where you have that wing on the left, and you have a total of 5 bedrooms upstairs, and then the other rooms downstairs. This just shows you after Mary Jane Warfield Clay built the Whitehall in the early 1860s, there was a competition at the time, you know, who could have the biggest and the grandest home. And so she built a spectacular home. And in today's dollars, what she added would have been approximately $60 million. So Cassius he wasn't feeling very good about, you know, getting all these letters in Russia about all this money that she was spending. But now Clermont or Whitehall is 44 rooms, and it's 9 levels. When you look at it, it looks more like 3 stories, but they count the closets and the hallways and all the rooms as rooms. So they come up with 44 rooms, and it's on 9 levels because there's certain places where you step up a few steps and step down a few steps, and so they count additional levels. This is what the floor plan looks like after Whitehall was expanded, you know, and finished in 1862. It's an interesting time too, when you have the Civil War going on, and I had other relatives who were building places too. But this is Whitehall after the expansion. We visited this yesterday. This is the Revolutionary War Patriots plaque that's right there on Lancaster Avenue, and it's kind of interesting because it's land that Robert Rhodes gave to his daughter when she married Anthony Wayne Rawlins. And I have 4 relatives on there. Green Clay is one of them, and then James Anderson, Robert Rhodes, and James Barnett. And James Barnett was with Washington when he crossed the Delaware. And, you know, buried here in the Morin Family Cemetery, Barnett Morin Family Cemetery in Silver Creek. There's another picture of the plaque. Hope you can all see it and enjoy it. I think it was a wonderful effort on the part of the Madison County Historical Society. Much appreciated. So Green Clay was a soldier and a politician. He was in the Revolutionary War as a colonel. He was a lieutenant in George Roger Clark's 1782 expedition against the Shawnee. In the War of 1812, which began June 17, 1812, also known as the Second War of Independence from Britain, Green Clay received a commission from the first Kentucky Governor Isaac Shelby as a general in the Kentucky militia, and responded to the spring 1813 call of General William Henry Harrison in leading 3,000 troops to the defense of Fort Meigs. Fort Meigs is in northern Ohio, just below Michigan and just below Lake Erie. And so he led 3,000 troops into Fort Meigs to, you know, defeat the Indians and the British. And then he stayed on and defended the fort because he did such a good job. And later there were attacks by 1,500 British soldiers and 5,000 Indians, and they were able to fend off everybody. The War of 1812 ended December 24th, 1814, but news traveled slowly in those days, so the Treaty of Ghent was signed in Belgium to formally end the war in early 1815. And just a little bit of history, because I had to teach myself this in the process. In the 1790s, the British were fighting the French, and it was back and forth, and Napoleon, wasn't defeated until 1815 at Waterloo. And the British were they were intercepting American ships that were taking supplies to France. And we wouldn't have won the Revolutionary War without the help of France. And the British would, confiscate the ships and charge taxes, even though the goods, weren't going to Britain. So the British were very upset with the Americans supporting the French. Green Clay served in the 1792 Kentucky statehood in both the House and the Senate at the Kentucky legislature, and he was Speaker of the Senate in 1807. Green Clay was a cousin of Henry Clay. He was the second cousin. And some things that we remember from the War of 1812, that's when Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner at Fort McHenry in Baltimore. And at September 14th, 1814, that's where, U.S. Constitution was called Old Ironsides, because the wood on the boat was about 22 inches thick, and cannonballs would just deflect off of the wooden stern. And also, that's when the British burned the White House. Green Clay was known as an entrepreneur, a ruthless entrepreneur. I actually think I would have enjoyed talking to him, and I would have enjoyed him and Cassius Marcellus Clay, and I would have enjoyed listening to them. He made his fortune as a surveyor, a farmer, owner of taverns, ferries along the Kentucky River, distilleries, and also warehouses. In 1794, Green Clay owned 1/4 of all land in Madison, Bourbon, and Clay counties. At his death, he was the largest landowner in the Commonwealth of Kentucky with over 40,000 acres. He was also the largest slave owner in the Commonwealth with 105 slaves at his passing. Some of the slaves were emancipated. One of the slaves was given to his wife. There were other slaves who were distributed among his children, and there were some slaves who were sent to New Orleans, unfortunately, to be resold. Green Clay was also the father of the first big abolitionist in the Commonwealth, Cassius Marcellus Clay. One of the things just before the battle at Fort Meigs, they had the battle on the River Raisin. The River Raisin was very close to Fort Meigs. It was actually in the Michigan Territory, right north of Fort Meigs in northern Ohio, and it was fought from January 18th to January 23rd, 1812, and it was one of the 4 principal campaigns of the War of 1812 engaged in by Kentucky forces. Following the defeat of the American forces at Frenchtown, as many as 60 Kentucky soldiers were massacred by Indians serving under the British. When the news of the massacre reached Kentucky, patriots exhorted one another with shouts of "Remember the Raisin," which gave the new nation the vengeance-fired impetus to wage the remaining battles of the War of 1812. On my previous trips to Kentucky, I've heard the phrase "Remember the Raisin" a lot, so I decided to find out exactly what it meant and share it with you. This is a map of what from that time, and you can see in the lower left the Ohio Territory, and the top left part of Ohio, you can see Fort Meigs, and just above that you can see the Raisin River, and that was in close by in the Michigan Territory, and both close to Lake Erie. Now, I wanted to share with you Fort Meigs and what it looks like today. This is an aerial view of Fort Meigs in northern Ohio. This is in the interior of Fort Meigs. Cannon from Fort Meigs. More cannon. The front gate, Fort Meigs, and more of the interior of the fort. Now, one of the things that was a result of the War of 1812 is that Green Clay was given a horn cup in appreciation of his being a general in the War of 1812. So you'll see on the screen the federal bald eagle. You'll see green clay at the bottom, and the bottom right says 1813. There's another side of the cup, and it shows, it depicts the fort, and off to the right, there's a fish because it's on the river, and then down below there's a horse. And then here's a depiction of the fort. And Mac, do you want to Mac has the cup. And last year when we were here, Mac and Sharon acquired the cup in our presence. Turns out they got it from a person who also is a relative, a Rhodes relative. So anyway, it's a very fragile cup and very valuable. Obviously, there's only one of them. And Mac offered to let me bring it, but I declined.
Okay, perfect.
You offered to let me bring it, but I declined.
Yes.
So anyway, Mac has the cup. You can see it's very small. It's very fragile. It's made out of antler bone. Cowbell. Okay. And anyway.
And the bottom is an 1803 silver dollar. You're going to share that one as well?
Pardon me?
The other cup?
No, I'm not going to share the other cup.
Well, there were two cups made. Some people have attributed this to the family of Scott family, the Daniel family, the Warren family, and it's not. But there was a second cup presented to the bottom at Fort Millions, made by the same maker as this cup. And this, I'm not sure exactly, probably with the Bruce way, because it has some initials in there. And then it ended up selling on family or
Thank you. Appreciate it. So also in appreciation of green clay, he was given a silver mounted sword, and I'm not sure where it is right now. I'm hoping it's in the EKU archives, but I'm not sure. But this was in a Civil War roundtable as part of an exhibit last year, and so this was shared with me. But this is the sword that green clay was given, and then Mel Hanklett, you know, part of his book was about green clay, and also has this sword in it. And then the cup that Matt just showed is in the top right. That was on display at the same time, the Civil War roundtable. Another interesting thing that's in the EKU archives is a letter from Thomas Jefferson to green clay from 1823. And this is the letter, but I'm going to read you the translation, which is much easier. Thomas Jefferson wrote this letter at Monticello, May 28th, 1823. Sir, your favor of the 4th is just now received, and I am sorry it is not in my power to give you any information on the subject of your inquiries. Such a length of time has elapsed, so much is my memory impaired by age, and so much other matter has since passed through it, dislodging what has preceded, that not a trace remains of any treaty with the Cherokees concerning the lands you mentioned. If such a one was concluded with the U.S., it would be found in their laws. If by the state of Virginia, it may have been among the records destroyed by the British, in which case it could only be found among the Cherokees, who may have preserved it. With my regret that I cannot aid you with any recollections, be pleased to accept assurances of my high respect and esteem. Thomas Jefferson. And again, here's the letter, and I think that's just wonderful, and it's probably something not everybody's aware of. And it's in the EKU archives. This is from the book of cemeteries for Madison County, and this is the Green Clay Cemetery, which is right next to Whitehall. And the first entry is Green Clay, who died at 71 years, 2 months, and 17 days. I kind of find that interesting. And he died on Halloween night. The second entry is Edmund Irvin. The third entry was a daughter of Green Clay and Sally Lewis Clay, Sally Ann Johnson, and she only lived to be age 25, and she was the third daughter of Green Clay. The fourth entry is Sophia Clay, and she was the youngest child who died at 16 months. And then the last entry just says Nancy, not sure who it is, don't recognize it as a family name. I'm thinking and hoping it was a slave of the Clays and a beloved slave, and she was buried in the Green Clay Cemetery. This is an article on Green Clay, and it's from an old book, and it shows you what the Green Clay Monument looked like originally. At the bottom left, that's the Green Clay Monument. And I don't know if it's cattle or trees or vandalism, but it's all in pieces now in the Green Clay Cemetery. But that is what it looked like, and someday I'd like to see it return to that. This is the Green Clay Cemetery, and then this is the designation of Green Clay being in the War of 1812. This is what the cemetery looks like to the right of Whitehall. It's surrounded by a wooden fence, and it's got trees inside the cemetery. Really wouldn't even know it's there. And I'm going to show you some more views of the cemetery. This is inside the cemetery, and you can see just a little right of center, and you can see the foundation of the Green Clay Monument. And then the big pieces that you see on the left, those are part of the Green Clay Monument. At a distance, also you can see the fence around the cemetery. It's not a very big cemetery. And those are other stones that, have just fallen apart or been destroyed over the years. This is from outside the cemetery looking in from the other side. And then there's more pieces, around the tree. Unfortunately, this is the condition of the cemetery. And the little gravestone off to the left, that's the one that says Nancy on it. The stone at the top right, that's part of the Green Clay Monument. And then this is the one that says Nancy. You can see there, that's the Green Clay Monument. And then there's a close-up of it's a little one that says Nancy. A lot of times when you see little gravestones, they're for kids. So, but I don't recognize the name Nancy. I can't place it. More pictures of Green Clay Cemetery. And then this is part of your Madison County Historical Society Brain Trust on the top right. That's Dean Whitaker. And then more of your brain trust in the center is Tom Black. And then that gentleman is his name's Ed Herzog. He's a family friend of the Bennett family. And we were inside the cemetery looking around and taking pictures, and he drove by to make sure we were not doing something nefarious. This is a picture of Whitehall later on. If you look at the right side in the center, that's Cassius Marcellus Clay. And Green Clay and Cassius Marcellus Clay, they liked sheep, and they were, they had a lot of sheep, and it was mainly to make clothes. Earlier on, it was clothes for all the people that lived on the property. But so this picture, if you look at Cassius Marcellus Clay, that's probably around the time that he married the second time, and it was about 1890 when he married the second time. He married Dora Richards, and that was a scandal because she was very young. And she also died very young, and I think she died around age 32 or 33, and she'd had 5 or 6 marriages by then. And then this is Whitehall after the addition. It'd be around the same time, late 1890s. Here's a postcard. It's called a stereoscope card. That's from the EKU archives of Whitehall, and there's a couple in the front center. Don't know who they are. This is what Whitehall looks like today, and the people who are going on the tour next month, you'll have the pleasure of seeing Whitehall. This is a picture today of what the side of Whitehall looks like, and that entrance there on the side would have been one of the entrances to Clermont. And so if you look at from where that entrance is and then off to the left, that's the original Clermont, the far left being the wing that they added around 1802. This is a picture today that I took, but it's of the wing. So that was the wing that was added on to Clermont. Here's the gardens there. More of the gardens. And the beautiful trees. And then that's probably an ice house. And then those are, that building there, that it's over 200 years old. It's a stone structure, a very early stone structure. And in those days, they would have had the kitchen in an outbuilding and then workshops up here. This is a close-up of that building. And then you would have a smokehouse, you know, to hang meat and, you know, other outbuildings. And I was going to dedicate my talk to, well, I am to Neil Park, and we, with the help of Vicki Whitaker, who's not here, because of an illness tonight, and Dean, we are making Neil Park a posthumous member of the Boonesboro Society. And he qualified to be a member of the Boonesboro Society, but never applied during his lifetime. So we're taking care of it now. So once Dorothy's in the hospital right now, but if and when I can see her while we're here, we'll give her the certificate for Neil. And the reason I got this idea is Vicki and Dean were nice enough when my late twin brother passed away, they were nice enough to make my brother a posthumous member. So I stole the idea, and you know, we've done the same for Neil. And I just wanted to thank the Madison County Historical Society, and Sharon Graves and I are actually cousins, and Sharon Mitchell and I are cousins, and wanted to thank the Sharon and Matt Cox and the Cox collection. That's where the cup came from. And then the memoirs that are in the EKU archives. And when I first met Vicki Whitaker 9 years ago, I saw her and we met, and the next day I saw her again, and she said, "Hugh, I just want you to know that we're 13th cousins 3 times removed." So she's somebody who can figure that out. And then Jackie Kuchar also was very helpful to me in putting together a lot of the pictures that I had. And as I always do every year, I want to thank Sandy, because she's very patient with my interest in family history and puts up with everything I do with the family history. So that's it. Thank you.